You're listening to Up to the Mic. If you want to learn about the struggles and triumphs of starting a business, performing for sold-out arenas, or inspiring those you lead, Up to the Mic is the show for you. Throw on some headphones and get ready to listen as our host, Vinny Hale, sits down to showcase the stories of those who deserve their stories be told. From young entrepreneurs to critically acclaimed musicians and so much more, Vinny helps compile a season of interviews that inspire listeners to follow in the footsteps of his guest. Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Up to the Mic. Today's guest joins us from Houston, Texas, with over 20 years of experience in the financial services industry. He is the host of Money Matters, a radio show and podcast that aims to democratize financial literacy and make it accessible to all. Please welcome my next guest, Chris Hensley. Chris, thank you so much for being here today. It's an absolute pleasure to have you on an episode of Up to the Mic. But yeah, it's great to have you.
Absolutely, Vinny. I'm excited to be here. Thank you for inviting me on the show.
Of course. Well, we're gearing up for our third season. You'll be one of the episodes on it, and I can't wait for the listeners to hear it. As we get into the episode, they will have heard my intro here at the beginning, but I'd like them to hear it from you. Maybe start off by giving us just a little bit of the storyline, where you're from, what your time was like growing up, and then once we kind of transition, we'll go into all of the great things that you're up to these days.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm here in Houston, Texas. I grew up in a small town outside of, in fact, it's a village. I think per capita, you have to have a certain number of people for it to be a city, right? The village of Dickinson. And so they are just maybe 20 minutes, a suburb away from Houston. When I was about 10 years old, I moved up to Alief, Houston, Southwest Houston, and went to high school and middle school in Alief, and then have lived, I'm now in the Meyerland Bel Air area of Houston, and have lived here basically my whole life.
Awesome. So I love to have another Texas native on the podcast. I'm from another small town in Texas for those listeners who might just be joining in and haven't heard me tell the story before, but I'm from a town called Orange, Texas, and it's right on the border of Texas and Louisiana. So very close to Houston, actually. Growing up, that was our big city to go to if we ever actually needed to go to the mall or anything major.
I love it. We actually have property out in Woodville, so that's not quite as far as you are, but it's getting on the way to Louisiana, so kind of in between there.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. Well, awesome. So with all that being said, the Texas native, I should say, on the podcast here with me, not only do we share the similarity of both being from Texas, but we also share the similarity of being behind the microphone quite a bit. You've got your own radio show. Maybe just tell the listeners a little bit about what it is you do and what you talk about and how that all came to fruition.
Yeah. So we are Money Matters podcast, and that we hit our decade anniversary this year. So been podcasting for over a decade. We have been live at KPFT Houston here for several years. We're no longer live on the air on the radio version of it, but the show actually evolved out of terrestrial-based radio right here in Houston, the heart of Montrose. KPFT, it's one of the few volunteer-run stations that there's a couple sister stations in the U.S. here. But that was a unique experience. We've been I'm podcasting for quite some time. And somebody told me when we were doing the live show, which was every Friday at 10 a.m. like clockwork, that the MP3 that was just part of the show that was being recorded, you need to make a podcast out of that. So, you've got this almost a derivative of the show, right? And people are listening to it. That was when podcasting was just first coming out, really. Fast forward to today, where we get more listeners internationally than we do here locally, all through the podcast. So the idea of the medium of the podcasting, people being able to listen to you on demand, the intimate relationship of being in their ear, right? It's almost like a one-on-one conversation. Just to have that platform and to be doing podcasting for that long has been quite an adventure there. So.
No, I can definitely attest to that. I am curious, though, with a name like Money Matters,
Yes.
What do you typically structure your podcast or your episodes around? I'm assuming the talks of money and financial literacy. What is it that you hope to provide in value from your podcast? And were you in that career or in that career currently that has led you to starting this?
Yeah, you'd think that, right? No, so, money is such a broad topic that over the last 10 years, the show has evolved. So when we started the show, the idea was to have conversations with regular everyday people about finance. And it was really the idea of kind of stealing it from these talking heads on CNBC that kind of shoot above us and try to sound really, really smart, but aren't doing a good job of educating people or really kind of getting into the weeds of what's really going in our financial lives. So, the first several years of the show was really, really focused on financial literacy. But that has evolved. At some point we started bringing in experts in the field. So I'm a financial advisor. I have my own company, Houston First Financial Group, and so that's kind of what pointed me in this direction. I wanted to be a financial advisor, but when I was back in high school and you asked me, what do you want to do when you grow up? Financial advisor wasn't on that list. So teaching was on that list. So, I go out and I do a lot of seminars and public speaking and that sort of thing. Podcast and a radio show was kind of the marriage of those two things, right? Being able to teach, but also to do helping people financially. And so that was kind of a natural progression. But over the 10 long years that we've been doing this, the show has definitely evolved. We've had, several New York Times bestselling authors. We had the mayor here in Houston pretty shortly after getting on the air. We had Bill White, former governor of Texas, Carol Alvarado, so a lot of local politicians and that sort of thing. New York, people, international guests across the world, really now. It's kind of crazy saying that. Now that I'm talking it out and thinking about it. So we've had, a lot of really big experts, and that's kind of shaped what the message has become. It's such a thing that, money is broad and we can talk about anything. I've had like financial fitness, health and wellness, stress related stuff. That we now have a YouTube channel. This started during the pandemic. And it was also just kind of how the MP3 was a byproduct of the show, right? The YouTube channel really started during the pandemic when everybody went virtual. And so, we are on many different podcasting platforms on the audio MP3 version, but we just started doing the YouTube videos back then. We've got more hits on the YouTube than we do on the Libsyn and on iTunes, all that stuff, right? So the reason I'm going there and talking about this is that YouTube, we kind of have to treat it a little bit different. The video portion of it, we're having to go back and retrain the algorithm that's only seen us since the pandemic, that we're not a variety show. We actually are about finance and financial literacy and retirement. So unique, different thing to think about and having to go back, but we're trying to meet people where they're at and helping them find us. So kind of a different way to think about it than just putting it out on Libsyn or Pandora, or the ones I'm giving you. I think they're all not even around anymore, right? What's the Spotify? Right. I think it's one of the most popular ones now.
Spotify, Apple Podcast. Yeah.
Yes. So, rather than, we still do all of that. We post all of that on the audio version of it, but the YouTube channel is fantastic because we're getting a lot of international exposure too. So just something to think about there.
No, I love that. I've actually started transitioning a lot of these episodes, being that they're recorded with the live video, to being posted on YouTube as well. I think most of my following resorts to Apple Podcast or Spotify, but that option is there to potentially grow if more listeners want to join in that way and see the face-to-face or the virtual interaction that I actually have with the guest.
100%. Yeah, it's one of those things that I was like, I don't know if I'm going to go there with it. We totally went there with it, and I'll ask my 13-year-old son, anything you need help on YouTube, tap somebody younger than you, get them involved. He gave me a crash course in it, and I'm like, okay, well, if they can do that, I can do this.
Well, hey, as a financial advisor and a very well-seasoned one, you've been doing it for a while now, owning your own company. What are some of the most common pitfalls or words of advice that you can give for people that might be coming, a lot of the listeners on the podcast are either in college or young adults shortly thereafter, trying to get on their feet with their first career. What are some words of advice you can give to them that can maybe make them get a step up in the game of finance?
Yeah, so there's a ton of really good, things, nuggets of gold that I can leave with listeners in that age group, because you have not, just about 10 more years, you're going to have some conflicting goals there. People start coupling, getting married. They're actually buying homes, and you're going to have other goals that get conflicted there. But that's a nice sweet spot, that age, whether you're just still in college or just graduating from college. Things like savings, right? That doesn't sound sexy or exciting, but the idea that everybody should have about 3 to 6 months of committed living expenses as a cash cushion, as a safety net, so that they're able to, one, if an emergency comes up, they have a bucket of funds to dip into. That you're giving yourself permission. That's what they're there for, right? But two, if you do have any opportunities that come up. So, some of the younger people will buy sleeves of equities or stocks, right? As you get older, you're going to want to diversify and have a well-balanced portfolio and all of that. But with some of my most successful clients, fast forward in their 60s and 50s, right? When they were younger, they bought small sleeves of stocks, right? Just the old buy and hold approach. So you have, the time, really, the idea of compounding interest. Now, with that, when I say that, you got to let it cook, right? So you got to put in there, and you kind of got to let it cook. If it's something that you think you're going to need right away, that's not where you put it, right? So that cash bucket, that's one of the biggest things. Budgeting, really, nobody really fesses up and says, "Hey, I'm not great at budgeting," but we've all been there, right? We all know some of the things that we need to do when it comes to budgeting, and then we'll get in these habits, and then we'll tend to backslide, and then we'll have to revisit and adapt to that. I always reminded a budget is a dynamic process. It's not a static thing that you just take a snapshot of your assets, your liabilities, your income, expenses one time, and then it just stays the same forever, right? That's not how it works. You will go back and revisit this all throughout your life as life changes there. And then probably the third one I would tell you that is really a strong thing is just buying a home. As soon as you possibly can, buying property. It's one of the things that if you're paying rent, you're paying somebody else's mortgage somewhere, whether it's a landlord, a giant corporation, or it's an individual who's leasing out a property to your home. Now, I know that's easier said than done because properties are expensive, right? Getting a mortgage is expensive. But just letting people know that that's one of the very first things. There's very few things I could say. These are general recommendations across the board that people should do, right? Where's my compliance department? Past performance is not indicative of future results, right? But there are some things that I can see people who are very successful in their financial lives that do, and that's one of the behaviors I see is buying real estate early on.
That's a predicament that my wife and I are in right now. Predicament's not the right word, just a conversation we're having around. We love the place we live, whether or not it's time to rent for another year or whether or not we want to branch out and buy a home. The area that we live at in Dallas has very insulated housing prices. So being that we want to stay in this general area and location, finding a reasonably priced home for a first home is not as ideal as you would think it might be. So right now we're weighing the pros and cons of whether or not it's worth it to rent for another year and save up a little more, or potentially go out and splurge a little bit, but at least be in the home and figure that out once we get there. A little bit of a challenge right now with having to do a lot of financial work on our end. I've got Excel spreadsheets all day trying to figure out not only my day job, but also our finances here at home.
I love it. And that's one of the things that we did when we first got married. We tend to have this idea that it's going to be a forever home, right? but it's not. Most of the time we'll stay in a place, and then you know, what we did is when we got married, we bought a small, inexpensive condo in a really nice area. We got like the cheapest thing we could find in the nicest area that we could. And a lot of times when you're buying real estate, you make your money on the appreciation side. So that's one of the things is make sure you're getting an area that is tending to go towards appreciation, right? Because property can lose value. That's what we were trying to avoid doing, right? But we were able to sell that 5 years later and get a bigger house, and we used the equity from that to do that with. And so, the idea that you're going to be in that house forever, it's different, right, than generations past where somebody lives in the same home for 50 years or so. Just something to think about there. Yeah,
absolutely. So tell me, you said you were going to potentially, or you wanted to be a teacher. What ended up swaying you in a different direction? And then before that, what kind of teacher would you have been? Is there a specific subject line that you were maybe most interested in or most passionate about?
Oh, that's a great question. This one doesn't come up that much. So I studied English and philosophy in college. So how the heck did you get into finance, right? I like to remind people that Peter Lynch also studied philosophy. So I'm not the unicorn out there, but that's literally what I wanted to do. I wanted to go on and become a philosophy professor, which took a graduate degree. And, really, I had some of the most intelligent professors in college, but when I looked at them and I looked at their demeanor as far as whether they were happy, right? Happiness units. These are things we learn about in philosophy, right? That we study. Some of the most intelligent and brilliant professors that I had were some of the most miserable, not happy people that I've ever met. Very analytic and very smart. The kind of person that could, do great in front of a class and conduct, a seminar, right? But if you went to go see them after hours, just cantankerous and hard to get along with. I don't know. This is a generalization. I hope I don't.
Right.
But that kind of, pointed me into that direction. Well, how serious are you about this? And then I found out later, it's publish or perish. So there is a lot of politics. The idea that you just get in there and you teach and that's it. If you want to be successful in that career, at least for philosophy, right? You don't see a lot of people in line for that specific, in my other English, right? So you don't see a lot of, as far as marketable and stuff. So at one point, I've been doing this for over 20 years. So I was always interested in money and finance. Some of my earliest memories, I remember seeing a newspaper. Do you remember those things? The newsprint that we would get on Sundays. And when you got to the business section, there were many, many pages of just numbers and percentage signs. And that was like a mystery to me. I was like, what the heck is that? And that was how stock quotes were given back in those days, right? So if you wanted to see how, Petco, Bed Bath & Beyond was doing, you'd go find the ticker symbol and you'd track it in this giant, page, right, on the newspaper. That was something that I'm kind of one of these people that if something is complicated, it makes me want to solve it like a problem. Right. So that kind of pointed me towards, well, what the heck is this? What are stocks? What is finance? And I used to work at a bookstore many years ago, and I met somebody there who was moonlighting from a bank. He was a banker during the day, and he worked at a Crown bookstore at night, part-time, right? And I was assistant manager there. And he hit me to some really good books on stocks and investing. And I like to tell the story that one of the first stock investments I had is I bought Yahoo when it went IPO. Unfortunately, we sold it to buy a couch at IKEA. I think that's about the most 90s thing that I could say out loud here. Unfortunately, I wish we still had it. And then I started working with what used to be American Express Financial Advisors, and I was one of the highest producing first year advisors. I had a really good year that first year, and it's one of those things that I worked very hard, and when I saw the fruits of my own labor pay off, kind of gets in your blood, right? So then the whole philosophy stuff kind of took a back seat, and I said, okay, I could see myself doing this full time. And fast forward 20 years, and I own my own company, and I'm independent, and I'm my own boss, and say my own worst boss, but my own boss, right? Yeah, it's amazing when I look back at that. Yes.
What is it like owning your own company and being your own worst boss, to quote yourself there? I know you say that in jest, but I'm just curious. I know a lot of times there's this, especially with people that are around the age of our typical viewership, of this entrepreneurial journey and the mindset behind being your own boss and making your own schedule and making all this money and living this glorious life that really gets probably overglorified on social media in a lot of ways. Sometimes I like to go straight to the source and ask people like yourself, what are the realistic expectations for someone, even though those can vary widely? You can be great or you can be bust depending on what you go for. What has your experience been like with owning your own company, and what advice can you share?
Yeah, anybody who is a true entrepreneur who has had a successful business, typically they've had 2 to 3 failed businesses in the past. So when I meet somebody that tells me they're an entrepreneur or they're just getting in their first business, I usually try to discourage them. But here's the thing, it doesn't matter. If they're an entrepreneur, they will keep doing it. It's just like I mentioned earlier that it's in your blood, right? You know, people who are entrepreneurs, it's a personality type that you really can't stop it from going that direction. With that being said, it is very difficult, right? Typical entrepreneur, you're going to get kicked in your teeth multiple times throughout the beginning of your business, right? You'll end up doing things that you didn't think you signed up for. Like I signed up to be a financial advisor. I didn't sign up to be a marketer, right? Or a salesperson, right? And that's not just my career as financial advisor. That is most businesses. You could be the best, Joe the plumber, right? But if Joe the plumber doesn't have any clients, he could be the literal best plumber out there on the planet and nobody will find him. So a lot of entrepreneurs, if you usually start with sweat equity, right? You don't have staff yet. And so you're having to wear all of those different hats. So I'm not really trying to discourage people. I'm trying to full disclosure and let them know that that these are the things. When you raise your hand and say, "Hey, I'm going to be an entrepreneur," whether you knew it or not, these are the things that most of the time you're going to bring on board. And if you're still there, there are many, many rewards waiting at the end. Which now it's awesome, right? But when you start, it is a rough road for sure.
Absolutely. I've seen that even with just the podcast that I've got here. I mean, this isn't my full-time job by any stretch of the imagination. I work a real, 9-to-5 corporate job, which really isn't that 9-to-5, by the way. I work in consulting. But the point I'm making is I've had to learn to play a lot of different roles, and to your point, wear a lot of different hats than just sitting on the mic and releasing an episode or interviewing someone. It's, if I actually want to grow the viewership, what are the different social media platforms that I need to post this to? How do I market it to the right audience? How do I manage, the expenses that I have related to the podcast and any minimal income that I do have that comes in from the podcast? So those types of things have been a growing and a learning experience with me. But I will say, you can almost turn it on its head from what you were mentioning of how it might be a little scary at first to take on all these different roles, but at the same time, you're going to come out the other side of it with a lot more experience and a lot more knowledge than you would have just never going at it at all. So it's a pro and con that you've got to weigh when you go on that entrepreneurial journey.
Yeah, absolutely. Podcasting is a perfect example of that. That's your digital assets, right? 10 years ago when we started this, that's not what we thought was going to happen. And we're in an exciting time now. We're getting into podcasting is fairly easy. You've got, things I did manually because I'm kind of an audio nerd here, mixing the show down and editing this is me. So I do that. A lot of that stuff has become super duper easy with technology and AI. And so it's going to make it easier for people to get into podcasting. But the end result is, if you think about this, big corporations and big companies nowadays are trying to emulate that experience, this of us just having a conversation like this, right? You can't. Used to, companies would go take out a billboard, or they would go take out a picture in a magazine and hire the Madman agency, right, to put together some kind of advertisement. Just doesn't work the same. Social media works, right? So this is one of those things that, build it before they come. Well, it's here. And now you see even some of the bigger companies trying to emulate this, which it's hard to emulate. So I'm just going to validate that this, you're on the right path. This is the right thing. And for other entrepreneurs out there listening, getting involved with podcasting or guesting on podcasts and all of that stuff, getting your message out is a fantastic way to grow your business, for sure.
Absolutely. Stepping aside from our business conversation for a minute, what is it that you like to pursue, or what are your passions outside of work? Be it whether it be personal with your family life, whether it be hobbies or interests that you have outside of work. What is it that you like to do in your free time?
Yeah, so I'm an avid reader. I have read, from a kid all the way to now. I just, read as much as I possibly can. So that's probably one of the biggest things that I like to do. If you had talked to me back in December, I had been doing jujitsu for about 5 years, and have now pushed pause on that back in December. So I was training about 2 to 3 times a week and competing. And I'm 50 now, so I didn't even get started till 45. And honestly, that was the most athletic I've been my entire life. I was one of the kids that got picked last in PE. So this was one of those like later in life decisions, and really, really enjoyed it and loved it. I like going out in the woods. I mentioned earlier, we've got some property up in Woodville. And so we've got about 5 acres there that I've built like a little off-grid cabin and stuff. And so that's, if on the weekends when I'm not working, I like to go up there. When I say I'm not working, there's always work to be done out there. So I'll drive there to get away from the city, right? And it's relaxing. Right. As soon as you get outside of Houston and you get outside of the Pine Curtain there, it's just kind of the stress of, everything that you do kind of leaves you. But when you get out there, there's always something to do. So it's just a different type of work. I enjoy it. It's crazy. So.
Absolutely. Well, you mentioned it earlier that you had someone recommend a lot of good books during your early stages of breaking into the finance world. I'm curious whether it's those books or ones you've read since, now that you mention yourself being an avid reader. Are there any specific books or even podcast or radio recommendations that you'd like to share with the listeners, be it spiritual, personal, financial, whatever it is?
Yeah, there's a couple of them that stand out and bubble up to the top of my reading list there. From a finance related topic, the Ivy Portfolio by Meb Faber. That is the investment philosophy that I use. And so when people ask me about, what's a good investment recommendation book, right? That's the one I point them to, because that's the one that I really like and kind of emulate with my investment philosophy. The War of Art by Stephen Pressfield. That is a really good book, a small read, not real dense, right? Small book, a lot of information, really, really good stuff for creatives, people that like us, really. I manage millions of dollars in retirement. Being able to podcast and do something creative and hit pause on that part, the analytic part, and to be able to put a piece of work together. That's what I consider podcasting really is art in some ways, because we're creatives. It checks a box for me. And I'm sure it does for a lot of people that do podcasting as well, whether they realize it or not, right? Because most of the time they're doing other things in their life, and then it allows them to have this thing at the end that's something that they've created. I would say that even goes back to, what do you like to do? I love podcasting. So that's a big one too. Trying to think. Really, like everybody else into AI, there's a book that I just got finished reading on that, but that I wouldn't necessarily throw that one out here. Probably those two are the ones I would focus on as good book recommendations there.
All right. Well, I've got a goal this year to read 12 books, and I'm only 4 in, so I
Nice,
uh,
nice.
I need to make sure that I add those to my list.
For sure, for sure. If you email me separately, I'll send you a whole list of books. But yeah, just tell me what you like, and I'll point something out there. So
That would be perfect. That would be perfect. I am curious though. We've talked a lot about what you've done in the past and what you've got moving forward,
yeah,
or excuse me, what you've done in the past and what you're doing these days. Now, I'd like to maybe ask about what it is you're looking forward to, whether that
yeah.
be 5 years, 10 years, whatever the future holds for you. What is it that you're most excited about, either for yourself or just in general with the way the world is turning?
Yeah, and so I was mentioning just the growth of my practice and kind of seeing how that's gone from in person to more of a virtual practice, and that gives me the ability to go outside of Texas for clients, which I never would have thought that would have been a thing, especially with what I do for a living. It's very difficult to get people, locally, much less outside of Texas, right? To work with people, but this has changed. So I guess that's a message I'm letting people know that. And as my Gen X, as we get older, we're not afraid of the computer. And that's going to be the people that are going to be, moving into the retirement or the sandwich generation space there. So I'm very excited about being able to hedge technology as a smaller business against some of the larger businesses, right? You're seeing the playing field kind of evened a little bit with that. It's just me and my assistant, right? So my assistant lives in Friendswood. I'm here in Houston and the Bel Air area, and we've been able to do that really for the last couple of years, very on point. Without the BS that goes with a major, walking in an office with the mahogany and the suits and all of that stuff. And there's a lot of overlap. And I like to say too many cooks in the kitchen. So,
Yeah, definitely understandable. Well, I've appreciated everything that you have had to share today. Before I let you go, though, is there anything that maybe you were hoping that I asked you that I didn't, or maybe that you'd like to share with any of the listeners or people that you'd like to hear your story about?
yeah, no, I would just encourage people to find us on the internet, right? However they want to listen to us. If they want to listen to us on Libsyn, if they want to find us on YouTube, might be a little bit more difficult. So the podcast email internet address is www.moneymatterspodcast.com. So that's the easiest way to get us. The YouTube, there's a big long. I haven't even changed the URL over to like one that's even. It's some crazy. You need like a decoder, right? It's like a 20-digit character long digit, or so. I never even give that out. I just say look us up, go on to YouTube, search Money Matters, Chris Hensley, and you'll find us there. So.
Fantastic. Well, I will include all of that in the description to the show notes here when we post the podcast episode, so everybody has a quick and easy way to access you and your content. I really appreciate it. You'll have a new listener in me, and I'm glad that I got to share your story today. It's been an absolute pleasure, and I hope you have a great rest of your day, Chris. Thank you so much for being here.
Awesome. Thank you, Vinny. Have a good one.
Yeah. I'm like an addict, do I gotta have it. I ain't even playing, got a really bad habit. If it moves, gotta grab it. Fuse like a magnet, lose, won't have it till I'm doomed in a cat.